Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling a topic that's both deeply personal and universal: death and dying.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is a hefty one. You've given us a really interesting mix of sources, academic excerpts, cultural comparisons. You even touch on some legal and ethical debates. It's a lot to unpack. So our goal today is to help you navigate these complex ideas and maybe discover a few surprising insights along the way.
Yeah, I think that'll happen. It's interesting to think about how much our relationship with death has changed over time,
Oh, yeah.
even in recent history. The sources point to a pretty significant shift that occurred in the 20th century. One of them calls it the mortality revolution.
Mortality revolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. What was that all about?
Basically, before the 20th century, death was just more commonplace,
Right.
much more integrated into daily life. People died at home, surrounded by family. It was just, it was a part of life. But as medical advancements extended lifespans and death became more institutionalized, occurring primarily in hospitals, it also became something to be feared, something to be avoided.
So it makes you wonder, did this shift contribute to the rise of these more elaborate funeral practices as a way to cope with this new distance from death?
It's a good question. And speaking of funeral practices, your source material highlights just a remarkable diversity of customs from around the world.
Oh, absolutely. The Window on the World section was really an eye-opener.
Yeah.
I mean, the Irish wake with all the toasts and storytelling almost sounds like a party to me.
Yeah, it's a celebration of life, a way to remember the deceased with joy and laughter.
Yeah.
And then you have the Jewish Shiva, a much more somber period of mourning
Right.
that's very focused on introspection and community support.
And then you have, like, the Torjan people of Indonesia who take it to a whole other level
Oh, yeah.
with these elaborate funeral celebrations that last for days, sometimes weeks.
11 days.
11 days.
With feasting and music and even symbolic rituals where they care for the deceased's body.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to delay the finality of death.
Yeah, it really is. It's a fascinating example of how cultures grapple with that. But despite their differences, all of these rituals, they serve a universal human need
Absolutely.
to provide structure and meaning in the face of loss.
Yeah. And, it makes me think about how our understanding of death kind of evolves over a lifetime, too. The research in this source suggests it's not a one-size-fits-all process, right?
No, absolutely not. It develops gradually, influenced by our cognitive and emotional maturity. For example, children as young as 4, they can begin to grasp the permanence of death.
Wow.
And by the age of 10, most kids have a solid understanding of its biological reality.
So then as teenagers, we kind of push thoughts of death aside. I
Mm-hmm.
know I did. It's like too abstract, too far removed.
Exactly. Adolescence is a time of self-discovery, future planning, and death just feels like this distant concept. But it's still really important for teenagers to have those support systems in place
Oh, for sure.
to help them navigate grief if they experience a loss during that time.
Definitely. And then middle age rolls around and suddenly our own mortality becomes much more real.
Yeah, for sure. And the physical changes we experience, combined with that realization that our time is finite, can trigger a reassessment of our priorities. We might feel this new urgency to accomplish certain goals, or maybe just a deeper appreciation for each day.
Yeah. The source also mentions this intriguing concept called terminal drop.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean?
So terminal drop is also sometimes known as terminal decline.
Right.
It refers to the decline in cognitive function that often precedes death.
Oh, okay.
And it's not limited to just the elderly. It can be observed in people of all ages.
So it's not just physical decline, but also mental and cognitive changes as death approaches.
Exactly. And that decline can have a really significant impact on a person's emotional well-being, their relationships, their overall quality of life in their final months or years.
Okay. Now, I've always been fascinated by near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Those stories of the tunnel vision, bright lights. Is there any sort of scientific explanation for those?
Well, there are several theories. Some researchers believe that near-death experiences are triggered by physiological changes in the brain during extreme stress,
Okay.
particularly, oxygen deprivation. And actually, there was a really interesting study I read about where they found a surge of brain activity right before death in rats that were experiencing cardiac arrest. So that could maybe explain some of those vivid sensory experiences that people report.
That's incredible.
Mm.
But it doesn't explain everything, right?
It doesn't.
Because not everyone who experiences oxygen deprivation has a near-death experience.
Right. There are definitely other factors at play.
So then what about the psychological effects of near-death experiences? The source kind of suggests that these experiences, regardless of the cause, are often perceived as positive.
Right.
And can even lead to profound transformations.
Yeah. Many people report feelings of peace, joy, and even a sense of connection to something larger than themselves after an NDE. Some even describe it as a life-altering event. It changes their perspective on life and death.
Like they've been given a glimpse beyond the veil.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a trick of the brain, it makes you think. So then how do we grapple with that fear and anxiety that comes with knowing that we're going to die?
Yeah. Well, one theory that attempts to explain that is terror management theory.
Okay.
And it suggests that our awareness of death, coupled with our innate desire to survive, creates this fundamental tension.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to manage it through all these different psychological and cultural mechanisms.
So it's like we develop coping mechanisms to deal with the existential dread. What do those look like in practice?
Well, for example, when we're reminded of our own mortality, we tend to cling a bit more strongly to our cultural beliefs and worldviews.
Okay.
It's like we're seeking comfort and meaning in something larger than ourselves, something that transcends our own individual existence.
I could see that. So like religion, patriotism, even strong family ties, those can kind of provide a sense of security and continuity in the face of death.
Mm-hmm. They give us something to believe in that kind of extends beyond our own lifespan.
Right.
And terror management theory also suggests that high self-esteem can serve as a buffer against death anxiety.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. When we feel valued, loved, it reinforces our sense of worth. And it helps us believe that our existence has meaning even after our physical bodies are gone.
Makes sense. And what about our relationships? Do those play a role in how we cope with our mortality?
Oh, absolutely. Secure attachment relationships where we feel safe, supported, they can act as a buffer against that existential anxiety.
Okay.
It's like having a secure base from which to face the unknown.
Right. So knowing we have loved ones can make the prospect of death a little less daunting.
Exactly.
Okay. So now the source dives into Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It's a widely known model, but is it really a one-size-fits-all process?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, it provides a valuable framework for understanding the emotional roller coaster of grief.
Right.
But it's important to remember that grieving is a very personal journey.
Yeah.
And not everyone experiences all 5 stages or in a linear sequence.
Right. So it's more of a guide than a rigid set of rules.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Some people may linger in one stage longer than others, or they may revisit stages as they process their loss over time.
Precisely. And the source emphasizes that there are many different patterns of grieving. Some individuals go through a really intense period of grief work, while others experience, absent grief, chronic grief, even what's known as resilience.
Resilient grieving.
Yeah.
Is that where people bounce back quickly and adapt to the loss with relatively little distress?
Yeah, that's it.
I remember reading about that.
And it used to be viewed with some suspicion, as if there was something wrong with not feeling intense grief. But research now shows that resilience is pretty common, and it can be associated with some positive long-term outcomes.
So it's not about suppressing or denying grief,
No.
but rather about having the strength and coping mechanisms to adapt and move forward.
Exactly. And that speaks to the incredible capacity of the human spirit to find ways to heal, to grow, even in the face of profound loss. And each loss is unique, especially when we consider specific types of loss, like losing a spouse, a parent, or even a child.
Right. Let's start with losing a spouse. Statistically, women are more likely to experience widowhood and often at a younger age than men, right?
Yes. And while both men and women experience intense grief, they tend to face different challenges.
Oh, okay.
For women, the impact is often primarily economic,
I see.
while men struggle more with social isolation and loss of that emotional intimacy.
That makes sense. Women often rely on their husbands for financial stability, while men might rely more on their wives for that emotional support and social connection. There's a really poignant quote in the source. It says, "The loss of companionship may help explain why a widowed person, especially a widower, may soon follow the spouse to the grave."
Yeah. It highlights really the profound impact of losing a lifelong partner. It's not just an emotional loss, you know?
Yeah,
It can affect our physical health and well-being as well.
it can be devastating.
Hmm.
Losing a parent in adulthood is another kind of universal experience, but the source points out that it can be a catalyst for personal growth.
Absolutely. While incredibly painful, the death of a parent often forces us to confront our own mortality, to reevaluate our priorities, and to strengthen our sense of self.
Right.
So it can be a time of profound sadness, but also unexpected growth.
And the source mentions that dealing with a parent's death can lead to some really complex family dynamics, especially among siblings.
Oh, for sure. Making those decisions about end-of-life care, funeral arrangements, even
Right.
inheritance. These can bring up unresolved family issues, or even create new conflicts. So it just adds another layer of complexity to the grieving process.
Yeah. And you have the unimaginable pain of losing a child. The source really underscores the profound and lasting grief that parents experience after such a devastating loss.
It's a loss that defies the natural order of things, really.
It does.
And parents often feel this sense of guilt, of failure.
Right.
No matter how much they loved and cared for their child, it's just heartbreaking to think about.
Yeah. The source also mentions that the death of a child can put an immense strain on a couple's relationship as each partner grieves in their own way.
Hmm.
And we can't forget about the often overlooked grief of miscarriage.
Absolutely. It's a loss that's so often minimized or dismissed. Leaving those who experience it feeling isolated and unsupported, it's just so crucial to acknowledge that pain and provide that sensitive support.
Right.
Recognizing that it's a very real loss, even if the child was never born.
Right. And these experiences of loss, whether personal or societal,
Yeah.
they force us to confront some really difficult ethical questions,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to end-of-life decisions.
Exactly. And that's where things get really complicated. Your source delves into some sensitive topics like the right to die, suicide, the different forms of euthanasia.
Right.
Your source material here gives a helpful overview of those different forms,
Okay.
starting with passive euthanasia.
So passive euthanasia is essentially about withholding or discontinuing treatment
Mm-hmm.
that might prolong life. So that's like removing someone from life support when there's no hope of recovery.
That's a common example, yeah.
Okay.
And passive euthanasia is generally considered legal, especially when it aligns with the patient's wishes or their advance directives. But when someone desires to end their own life but requires assistance, that's where we enter a much more ethically complex territory.
Right. That's active euthanasia
Yeah.
or mercy killing. And the source points out that taking direct action to end a person's life is illegal in most places.
Exactly. That's where the Brittany Maynard case, as highlighted in the source, provides a really powerful illustration of the complexities surrounding assisted suicide.
Yeah. Her story really sparked a national conversation about physician-assisted suicide,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for individuals facing terminal illnesses and just unbearable suffering.
It's such a difficult issue, with so many ethical considerations.
It is.
On one hand, there's the individual's right to autonomy and self-determination, the freedom to make choices about their own body and life,
Yeah.
even if those choices involve ending their suffering.
But on the other hand, we have to consider the potential for abuse,
Right.
the role of physicians in ending life, and the potential impact on vulnerable populations.
Exactly. And that's why those safeguards in Oregon's Death with Dignity Act are so crucial.
Right, and the source describes those as requiring multiple physician confirmations of a terminal diagnosis,
Right.
ensuring the patient is mentally competent, and providing counseling to explore all other options.
Right. Those measures are designed to protect both the patient and the medical professionals involved.
Right,
But the debate's far from settled.
of course.
The source points out that even prominent medical organizations hold varying viewpoints on this. Some, like the American Medical Association, American College of Physicians, oppose physician aid in dying, while others, like the American Psychological Association, for example, take a more neutral stance.
It's clear there's no easy answer,
No.
and public opinion is divided as well. But, this ongoing discussion has brought much-needed attention to the importance of better palliative care.
I agree. Ensuring compassionate care, pain management, emotional support at the end of life is so essential, regardless of one's stance on assisted suicide.
Right, it's about providing dignity and comfort in those final moments. And the source brings up another really important point about respecting cultural diversity in end-of-life decisions.
Yes.
Different cultures have their own beliefs and practices, right?
Yeah.
And those need to be honored.
Absolutely. For example, some cultures might emphasize family decision-making over individual autonomy. or their spiritual or religious beliefs might influence their perspective on end-of-life care.
It's a reminder for healthcare providers to be sensitive to these differences and approach these conversations with respect and understanding.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between respecting individual autonomy and honoring cultural traditions when navigating these really sensitive issues.
Now, the source ends on a more reflective note, shifting from those ethical considerations to the concept of finding meaning in life and death.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that confronting our mortality can actually help us live more fully, more intentionally.
That quote from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross really struck me. It says, "It is the denial of death that is partially responsible for people living empty, purposeless lives." Sobering thought, but also a call to action.
It is. And the source also introduces the concept of life review, which involves reflecting on our past experiences and finding significance in them.
Life review.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a powerful tool for fostering peace and closure, especially as we approach the end of life. It allows us to integrate our experiences, forgive ourselves, forgive others, and find meaning in our journey. Are there any specific techniques that can help facilitate this process of life review?
Oh, absolutely. The source mentions several, like writing an autobiography, creating a family tree, revisiting old photos, even just having those conversations with loved ones about shared memories. It's about piecing together that narrative of our lives,
Yeah.
finding those threads of meaning that connect us to our past, present, and future.
It's like we're weaving a tapestry of our lives, finding beauty and purpose in both the light and the dark threads.
It can be incredibly healing and empowering,
Yeah.
and it's never too early or too late to engage in it.
Wow. I mean, it's amazing how much we've already covered, from these ancient funeral rituals to the science behind near-death experiences,
Yeah.
from the ethical debates around assisted suicide to like the profound concept of life review.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And through it all, one thing really stands out to me: the sheer diversity of ways that humans have tried to make sense of death across cultures throughout history.
Yeah.
It speaks to this innate need we have, to find meaning even in the face of our own mortality.
Absolutely. And, those torch on funeral practices, for example, celebrating death with like such exuberance and joy.
Right.
It really challenges our typical Western views on mourning.
It does. And the science behind near-death experiences raises some really fascinating questions.
It does.
So it's the nature of consciousness, and what might lie beyond our physical existence.
Right. It's like, is it purely physiological, or is there something more that we don't understand yet? And then the ethical dilemmas around assisted suicide. Those are incredibly thought-provoking.
Yeah, that's a conversation that's going to continue to evolve.
It is.
As technology advances and societal values shift, we're navigating uncharted territory in a lot of ways.
So you are.
So it underscores the importance of approaching these issues with compassion, with open-mindedness, a willingness to consider those different perspectives. There are no easy answers when it comes to these end-of-life decisions.
Not at all. But regardless of where we stand on these complex issues, there's one thing we can probably all agree on: the importance of providing compassionate care at the end of life.
Absolutely. Whether it's through hospice care, palliative care, or just simply being present with loved ones in those final moments, ensuring a dignified and comfortable death should be a priority.
For sure. Speaking of compassionate care, the source touches upon the unique challenges of providing culturally sensitive end-of-life care.
Right, yeah.
It's a crucial consideration because different cultures have such varying beliefs and practices,
Yeah.
and those need to be honored, don't they?
They do. Healthcare providers need to be aware of those differences to provide truly patient-centered care.
Right, like some cultures might emphasize family decision-making over individual autonomy. Others may have certain spiritual or religious beliefs that influence their preferences for end-of-life care.
Absolutely. It's essential to approach those conversations with respect, understanding, recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right, it's finding that balance between honoring individual wishes and respecting cultural traditions.
Yes.
And throughout all of these considerations, the concept of life review emerges as a really powerful tool for finding peace and meaning, both for those approaching death and those who are just reflecting on their lives.
Yeah. Life review can be so healing.
Yeah.
And empowering. It's about looking back at our experiences, all of them positive, negative, and finding those threads of meaning that connect us to our past, to our present, to our future.
And as the source points out, there are some specific techniques that can help facilitate this whole process.
Oh, yeah.
Things like writing an autobiography, creating a family tree,
Right.
or even just revisiting those old photos.
Yeah.
Sharing those memories with loved ones.
It helps us make sense of our lives,
Yeah.
Identify patterns, extract those valuable lessons. It's piecing together that whole narrative of our lives, recognizing the impact we've had on the world and the impact the world has had on us.
It's a beautiful way to think about it, like weaving a tapestry of our lives,
Yeah.
embracing the joys, the sorrows, and finding meaning in the entirety of that journey.
Exactly. And it's never too early or too late to engage in that process. Life review is a gift we can give ourselves at any point.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into death and dying, what stands out to you as maybe the most surprising or thought-provoking insight?
I think for me, it's just this realization that death, while inevitable, doesn't have to be a taboo subject. By exploring these issues, these complex issues, we can actually learn to live more fully, live more intentionally.
I love that. What about you? What resonated most with you from all this material that we've covered?
Well, you touched on it earlier, but I think the concept of life review is something we can all benefit from.
Yeah.
Just taking the time to reflect on those experiences, positive, negative, it can help us gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, the world around us, and it can help us find peace,
Yeah.
and closure, whether we're facing our own mortality or just seeking to make sense of our lives.
Yeah.
Death is a natural part of life. And by embracing that reality, we can free ourselves up to live more authentically,
Right.
more meaningfully.
Absolutely. So as we conclude this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
we want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question to ponder. We've explored these various cultural approaches to death and dying, but what rituals or practices do you find most meaningful or comforting when contemplating your own mortality?
Is it spending time in nature, writing letters to loved ones, expressing gratitude for each day? Or is it something else entirely?
It's a deeply personal question,
Yeah.
and there's no right or wrong answer. The important thing is to find what resonates with you, what helps you navigate this complex and often challenging aspect of being human.
And this deep dive, it's only really scratched the surface.
It has.
But hopefully it sparked your curiosity, encouraged you to delve deeper and explore your own beliefs, your own values surrounding these things.
Absolutely. And maybe even inspired you to approach each day with that renewed sense of intention, purpose, and a deep appreciation for life.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
It's incredible how much ground we've covered in this deep dive.
Oh, I know, it's a lot.
We've journeyed from ancient funeral practices to the science of near-death experiences,
Mm-hmm.
explored the complexities of physician-assisted suicide, and even delved into that profound practice of life review.
A lot to think about.
There is a lot. If we take a step back, though, and consider the bigger picture, it becomes clear that death, while inevitable, is a concept that we really grapple with on both a personal and societal level. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the most striking takeaways for me was just the sheer variety of ways that humans have attempted to make sense of death
Yeah.
across cultures and throughout history.
Yeah.
Like it says something, it speaks volumes about our capacity for meaning-making, even in the face of our own mortality.
It really does. It's fascinating. Like we said, those Georgian funeral practices with their elaborate celebrations and rituals
Oh, absolutely.
really challenged our Western assumptions about mourning and showed us this completely different way of approaching death. Like, wow, people really do it differently.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you have the science behind near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Equally fascinating. I mean, those accounts of tunnel vision, bright lights, a sense of peace,
Right.
makes you wonder if there is something more beyond our physical existence.
It really does. I mean, it opens up all these intriguing questions about the nature of consciousness,
Right.
about the possibility of an afterlife.
Right.
Questions that science might never fully answer.
Yeah. And then you have those ethical dilemmas surrounding assisted suicide. And that's something, we're going to continue to grapple with as our technology advances,
For sure.
as our values evolve. It's a complex issue.
It is.
There are no easy answers.
No.
And it highlights the importance of having these, open and honest conversations
Yes.
about end-of-life care, individual autonomy, patient wishes.
Exactly.
Ultimately, I think it's about making sure everyone has access to compassionate and dignified end-of-life options, regardless of their beliefs or their circumstances.
Absolutely. 100%. And speaking of compassionate care, the source really emphasized the importance of cultural sensitivity when you're making those end-of-life decisions.
You did.
And, different cultures, they have those varying beliefs and practices surrounding death,
They do.
and those need to be honored.
They absolutely do. And it's crucial for healthcare providers to be aware of these differences and approach these conversations with respect, with understanding. What might be considered a good death in one culture might be very different in another culture.
Totally.
And it's about recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to end-of-life care and respecting that diversity of perspectives on this very, very sensitive issue.
Right. And amidst all those considerations, that concept of life review emerges as such a powerful tool for finding peace and meaning,
Yes.
both for those approaching death and those who are just reflecting on their lives.
Right. And just taking the time to look back on our experiences, both the good ones, the bad ones, allows us to extract those valuable lessons and find, a deeper meaning in our journey.
It does.
And like the source suggested, there are so many ways to engage in life review. Writing an autobiography, creating a family tree, even just, sharing memories with loved ones.
Such a powerful thing.
It is. And all those activities, they help us weave together the tapestry of our lives.
Yeah.
Recognizing the impact that we've had on the world and the impact the world has had on us.
It's a beautiful way to think about it.
I think
A
so.
beautiful way to approach, the end of life. Or even just to gain a deeper understanding of ourselves no matter what stage we're at.
Yeah, I agree. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, we'd like to leave you with a final thought-provoking question to ponder. We've explored these various cultural approaches to death and dying. But what rituals or practices do you find most meaningful or comforting when you're contemplating your own mortality? Is it spending time in nature? Is it writing letters to your loved ones? Is it expressing gratitude for each day? Or is it something else entirely?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
This deep dive, it's only scratched the surface.
It has. There's always more to explore.
There is. But hopefully it sparked your curiosity to delve deeper, to explore your own beliefs and values surrounding death and dying. Maybe it's even inspired you to approach each day with a renewed sense of intention and purpose.
And appreciation for life.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into death and dying. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking. Until next time.